I became unwell a little over 10 years ago, and for a significant period of time the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was exhausted and I had burning pains all through my body, and a headache that felt like the pressure was going to come right through my forehead. I spent many of my days in my room with the blinds drawn. I lost all the things in my life that brought me a sense of joy and value. And I can still remember the first time I took a prescription opioid by the name of hydromorphone. And I remember a warmth in my stomach and a lightness in my body. I just laid there and I looked at the wall and I forgot about my pain and I forgot about my life. And for the first time in a long time, I caught my breath. But pretty soon that 1 2-milligram pill wasn't getting me very far, and I required 2 of them in order to have the same effect. And 2, as you might suspect, quite quickly gave way. It gave way to 3. In not much time at all, I found myself on 42 milligrams a day. That's 21 of the 2-milligram short-acting pills. There were days that went by that I didn't leave the house. If I made it down to the mailbox, it was considered a tremendous triumph. I remember my mother was cracking the door to my bedroom at night to make sure that I was still breathing because my respirations had become so low. And I remember every Sunday night my prescription would run out and a new one wasn't filled until Monday morning. And I always remember my mother asking me, "Alec, would you be able to save one of those 2-milligram pills for Monday morning?" But I never could. I always took all that I had. To be honest, it was even a struggle to have one for Sunday night. Not even taking what was in the cupboards from family members' past surgeries and past injuries. It was around this time that my family doctor lost his ability to prescribe opioids, and I was sent to another family doctor who immediately switched me to long-acting, and every 2 weeks he took me down a 2-milligram pill. But the process was slow and often felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And there were some weeks that I would go and see him and tell him that I wasn't even able to go down that 2-milligram pill this week. On those weeks he had understanding for me. He wouldn't take me down that pill. He'd leave me on the same dose. After a little more than a year and a half of working with him, I went to see him one final time. And he took me down that last 2-milligram pill. I haven't had one since that time. And this fits with our typical view of addiction. If you take drugs, you'll become chemically hooked on them. You need more and more to get the same effect, and then become harder and harder to get off. Essentially what's known as the pharmaceutical theory of addiction. But then I noticed something strange. I noticed that the times in which I wanted the drugs after I came off them were times in which the emotional pain was strong. Times in which there was heavy feelings of isolation. I began to wonder how much of my addiction had arose from the physical pain and how much had arose out of the emotional pain. And if you could truly separate those two, is one more real than the other? And this led me to all sorts of questions. I began to wonder if drug addicts were fundamentally no different than me, not bad or immoral people who made poor choices, but people struggling. And the drug of choice was just the best means they had found to cope. I began to wonder if drug addiction had more to do with a person's life story and experiences than it did with the drugs themselves. In my own research, I came across the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE study. The study showed that adverse childhood events lead to an increased risk of addiction in adult life. This doesn't mean that drugs are not addictive in and of themselves, only that there are other potential factors involved in substance abuse. We tend to like simple or one-picture answers. I believe that there are many paths to addiction, but I also believe that people in pain is a large piece of that puzzle. I have found in my life that the more energy I put into solving a problem a particular way, the harder it becomes to stop and move in a different direction. We've been using the war on drugs model now for over 100 years, and things are worse than they've ever been. The drugs are stronger than ever, and people are dying preventable deaths. If we saw addiction not so much as a drug problem, but as a pain problem, what would our new solutions look like? Would we begin to change our approach towards drugs and addicted individuals from a criminal justice issue to a health and safety issue? Would we begin to put more energy and effort into harm reduction strategies so things could be made as safe as possible for those who are struggling? These solutions would come with a new list of problems and questions, but at least they would be problems that could potentially be solved. When we see someone who's struggling with drug addiction, we often see the choice between do drugs or don't do drugs. But for a person who's struggling, the choice may be different. The choice may be between leaving my existence for a while and leaving my existence forever. A mindset takes over where your only interest becomes getting the drug again so that you can survive until tomorrow. I want to make clear that I am not promoting drug use, nor do I seek to downplay their potential harms. But if they are a part of our world, how do we make them as safe as possible? And if drug addicts for the most part are people in pain, how do we treat them humanely? Since coming off the opioids, I continue to have a large amount of pain and struggle in my own life. But I never went back to them as a way of coping, and I think I know why. After I stopped using them, I came across what one might call spiritual teachers. Men like Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning, as well as the work of Michael Meade and James Hillman. They helped me find meaning in my experience and my suffering. We have become very trauma-focused, but my interest lies in what the negative experiences of our life can lead us to. I believe that each person carries a soul, and that soul is here at this time for a reason. And I have found that life struggles have the capacity to reconnect us to what that reason is. I would not be a magician telling these stories without my hardships. As the poet Rumi once said, the wound is where the light enters you. I feel as though my situation could have been handled more appropriately from a medical perspective. That being said, I don't view the addiction as a personal mistake. And I understand that I dealt with the physical and emotional pain in the best ways I knew at the time. The opioids helped keep me alive. They gave me a break from my existence at a time in which it was too much for me to bear. I have found that there is something very powerful about spending time in nature. When we deepen our connection to the ancient world outside us, it has the ability to remind us of what is ancient within us. I can't help but wonder if a lot of the dysfunction we see in the world stems from something internal. This internal disconnection is something that each individual will have to heal. The addictions that we use to soothe ourselves and find a sense of fulfillment seek many outlets beyond drugs. Working with addicted individuals is no cakewalk, as a book like Gabor Mate's In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts will quickly show you. They often act and are portrayed in ways that make them easy to dislike, and that's probably one of the reasons our views of them have remained this way for so long. There may be someone in your life struggling with addiction, and they may not have been the best mother, father, daughter, son, or relationship in your life. But I believe it is important to try and see their entire story and not individual, isolated events. To pose the question of, would they have been a better, more stable relationship in my life if we had laws and a society that supported them rather than vilified the ways they cope? There has to be a deep level of empathy because we can't truly know what another is experiencing. I feel these questions are important to consider, but at the end of the day, it's important for you to do what is right for you in your own life and relationships. This all doesn't mean that a radical transformation is going to take place in the life of someone struggling with substance abuse. That being said, I do believe there is a great healing power in unconditional acceptance. It allows a person to truly take a look at what is going on for them. In a space of judgment or criticism, we often become defensive, and that defensiveness prevents awareness and the growth and healing that come from it. It may be that the people who carry these wounds also carry healing that would benefit the entirety of the community. We are living in times where many of the beliefs we carry about the world are falling apart. It will require the work of each individual to begin to examine their beliefs, to realize that what has been instilled may not actually be true, and begin the search for our own truth in this world.